Okay, let's start. Number 1. The Anunnaki. You're in northern Iraq in 1849. British archaeologist Austin Henry Layard is pulling clay tablets from the rubble of Ashurbanipal's palace in the ruins of Nineveh. The tablets have been buried for 2,500 years beneath the dust of what is now Nineveh province. It will take translators until the 1880s to render them into English. When they do, certain passages will not be filed with the others. Not because the language is difficult, because the language is too specific. The Sumerian word is Anunnaki. It appears in cuneiform across thousands of separate texts spanning multiple centuries and multiple city-states. That frequency makes it not a metaphor but a recurring proper noun. Translated literally from Sumerian root forms, it means those of royal blood descended, or in the most direct rendering of the prefix an, those from the heavens who came to earth. The texts do not treat them as abstract divinities. They treat them as a governing class. The Atrahasis epic, dated to approximately 1700 B.C.E., but drawing on Sumerian source material estimated at 4,500 B.C.E., contains the clearest operational account. The Anunnaki arrived on Earth in organized labor through an established hierarchy. When the lesser Anunnaki revolted against their assigned tasks, the resolution was to create humans. The tablets describe a specific procedure. The blood of one Anunnaki mixed with clay in a sealed chamber under controlled conditions, a gestation period, a new being designed for labor. Molecular biologists who have read these passages in translation without archaeological framing have described the process language using variations of the same term, genetic engineering. Here's what makes the texts uncomfortable. Mythological traditions produce gods who embody thunder, death, harvest, or cosmic principle. The Anunnaki texts do not do this. They produce administrative records. The Anunnaki are organized by rank and assigned territorial responsibilities. When disputes arise, councils convene. Proceedings are documented. The Enki texts name specific Anunnaki assigned to specific cities. The authority structure is not theological. It is bureaucratic. Their physical descriptions follow rules. Thousands of Sumerian cylinder seals depict tall humanoid figures with helmets, carrying instruments. One class is shown consistently with objects around their wrists that carry no obvious ceremonial function. Another class appears alongside winged discs described in the tablets as their mode of transit. The tablets name specific landing sites. A specific Anunnaki leader named Enlil is recorded as operating from a residence in the city of Nippur, with the precise location within the city documented in the administrative texts. The Sumerian astronomical tablets, now held at the British Museum, record Uranus and Neptune by name and orbital position. These planets are invisible to the unaided eye. European science did not confirm Uranus until 1781, Neptune until 1846. The Sumerians had both documented by 3000 B.C.E. Their measurement of the solar year is accurate to within 4 minutes of the modern figure. Their documentation of the precession of the equinoxes, the 26,000-year wobble of Earth's axis, requires centuries of systematic observation to calculate. The Sumerians credited none of this to themselves. Every major astronomical tablet, every legal code, every medical treatise cites the Anunnaki as the source. The Sumerians called themselves, explicitly, in their own texts, the people who were taught, not the people who discovered, not the people who invented. The Anunnaki gave civilization to them at a specific moment, through specific intermediaries, in a process the tablets describe step by step. No one has explained how a pre-telescope society documented outer planets invisible to the naked eye. No one has explained how texts from 4,500 BCE describe a biological procedure using process language that maps onto modern molecular biology. No one has explained why the most sophisticated civilization of its era explicitly refused credit for its own knowledge, pointing instead to beings who came from above, governed for a period, and left. The tablets are in London. The Anunnaki gave no forwarding address. But this was not the last time beings from above were named in this region. In the same rivers, in the same ancient world, another set of texts described 7 sages who came not from the sky, but from the sea. They wore the bodies of fish, and they brought everything that came after. Number 2. the Apkallu. You're looking at stone reliefs from the ancient Assyrian palace at Nimrud in the British Museum. The carvings date to approximately 850 BCE, but record a tradition several thousand years older. In the images, a series of figures stand facing a sacred tree. They are humanoid from the waist up. Below the waist, they are scaled, finned, unmistakably fish. Each figure carries a bucket in one hand and a cone-shaped object in the other, both rendered with ritual precision across dozens of separate sites, across centuries of carvings, without variation. They are not gods receiving worship. In every rendering, they appear to be performing a function. The Apkallu. The name is Akkadian, derived from older Sumerian root forms. 7 of them, described consistently across every text that mentions them. 7 sages, 7 teachers, 7 fish-bodied beings who emerged from the Abzu, the primordial underground sea, at the beginning of the antediluvian period. Each was assigned to a specific pre-flood king. Each brought a specific domain of knowledge. The first Apkallu, named Oannes, appeared in the reign of the first king and brought writing. The second brought law. The third brought the measurement of land and the working of metals. The pattern holds through all 7. The knowledge domains of civilization are parceled out, one by one, through beings who rose from the water at the moment each domain was needed. Here's what makes these texts different from mythology. Fish gods appear in many cultures and serve symbolic functions: the sea, chaos, primordial creation. The Apkallu do not do this. They have individual names, individual assignments, a sequence. They appear before the flood, disappear during it, and reappear afterward in a second series of post-Diluvian sages who carry forward what the Apkallu deposited. The knowledge survives the flood because it was transferred to specific human intermediaries before the water came. That is not mythology. That is contingency planning. The Neo-Assyrian incantation texts, dated between 900 and 600 B.C.E., and drawing on Babylonian sources from 1500 BCE, describe the Apkallu as still operative in a protective capacity, invoked in rituals for their ability to prevent disease and guard the home. Their images, the fish-cloaked humanoid figures from the Nimrud reliefs, were buried beneath the foundations of Assyrian houses by professional ritualists, not as decoration. As a working technology, the inscriptions specify exact positioning for each of the 7 figures beneath the threshold. This practice is standardized across an empire, documented in professional ritual texts, not folk custom. Wilfrid Lambert, of the University of Birmingham, spent decades in comparative Mesopotamian studies, publishing findings in the 1960s that identified the Berossus account of Oannes as a Greek-era compression of the 7 Apkallu tradition. Oannes is Oanna, the same name, different transliteration, the same figure. What Berossus records as a singular being making 7 visits to teach humanity is, in the cuneiform record, 7 separate beings, each assigned to one antediluvian king, appearing in order. The sequence matters. The knowledge was not delivered at random. It arrived in a curriculum. Now look at the cone. Every Apkallu in every relief across 150 years of archaeological discovery carries 2 objects, the bucket and the cone. The bucket appears in ritual texts as containing water from the Abzu, the primordial deep. The cone has never been identified. Researchers have proposed that it is a pollen cluster, a ritual purification instrument, or something without a known terrestrial equivalent. No consensus exists. Every Apkallu carries it. No one, after 150 years of professional Assyriological study, knows what it is. What were 7 fish-bodied beings doing delivering civilization's knowledge domains in organized sequence to the first 7 pre-flood kings? Why does their knowledge arrive fully distributed, as if the curriculum was prepared before the students existed? Why do they persist as active protective presences thousands of years after they first appeared? And why has no researcher in 150 years identified what the Apkallu are carrying in their right hand? The figures are carved in stone. They are not looking at the viewer. They are always facing the tree, performing a function that no one in 3,000 years has fully defined. 400 miles to the south, a Babylonian priest wrote down a more precise account of the same being. In this version, the fishman came out of the sea every morning and returned every night, and he never ate food on land. Number 3. Oannes. You're reading a fragment from a Greek translation of a Babylonian text written around 278 BCE by a priest named Berossus. The original Babylonian sources Berossus worked from have not survived, but Berossus's account was copied by Alexander Polyhistor in the 1st century BCE, then partially preserved by Eusebius of Caesarea in the 4th century CE, then partially again by Syncellus in the 9th. What you are reading has traveled through 4 languages across 12 centuries, and it still says the same thing. Berossus describes the being with anatomical specificity. At some point in the first year of human civilization, in the region of Babylonia, a being emerged from the sea, the body of a fish, but beneath the fish body, a second head, human and human feet, extending from the fish tail. During the day, he came out of the water. He taught. He taught humans writing, art, agriculture, law, geometry, and astronomy. Every evening, at the end of the teaching day, he returned to the sea. He never ate food on land. He ate nothing. He came, taught, and returned. This cycle continued for generations. Berossus counts 7 appearances of Oannes-type beings across the full span of antediluvian civilization, each appearing at a different moment in human history. The phrasing he uses for the knowledge Oannes delivered has been analyzed by classicists for 2 centuries. The consensus translation is that Oannes gave humanity everything necessary for civilization. Berossus then writes a sentence that has troubled scholars since the first English translation in the 19th century. Since that time, nothing new has been invented. Here's what separates the Berossus account from mythology. The Greeks produced abundant sea deity tradition: Poseidon, Proteus, the Nereids, Triton. None of these beings come ashore to deliver agricultural technique and geometric principle before returning to the ocean on a daily schedule. Greek sea gods are elemental, symbolic, narrative. Oannes is procedural. He has a schedule. He teaches specific subjects. He does not perform miracles. He gives instruction. And then he leaves, every evening, returning to whatever exists beneath the surface of the sea. Wilfrid Lambert's comparative work identified the Berossus account as a Greek-era compression of the 7 Apkallu tradition. Oannes is Oanna, the same name, different transliteration, the same figure. The 7 appearances Berossus records are the 7 Apkallu, collapsed into one figure making 7 visits. The collapsed version may be the older one. Berossus explicitly states he is drawing on ancient Babylonian temple records, predating his own era by unknown centuries. His source material has not been found. If it exists, it predates the Akkadian period. The figure he is describing, fish-bodied and human beneath, emerging from the sea each morning to teach and returning each evening, may predate cuneiform itself. Oannes never spoke about his origin. He answered no questions about where he went at night. He delivered knowledge in a sequence known only to him, then executed a departure that no ancient observer is recorded as having followed or witnessed. The water he returned to was described by Berossus as the sea, but the specific Greek term has also been translated as the abyss. Not the ocean surface, but the Abzu, the primordial deep, the domain of Enki, god of knowledge and water, the same place the Apkallu were born, the place where the knowledge of civilization was stored before it was given to humans. Oannes was not bringing knowledge he had invented. He was delivering what had already been kept below. Someone decided when to send him. Someone decided when he should stop coming. What is in the Abzu? Why did Oannes eat nothing on land? What happened on the nights he returned to the water? And why does the single most precise ancient account of a being who appeared to teach civilization describe something that was part fish, arriving from the sea each morning for generations, then simply not coming back? Berossus is dead. His sources are gone. Oannes has not been back. 3,000 miles west, on the other side of the African continent, a people with no telescopes described another set of beings from the sea. These ones came from a specific star system, and the astronomical data the Dogon gave about that system, before Western science could confirm it, was accurate to within 0.9 years. Number 4. The Nommo. You're in Mali in 1931. French anthropologist Marcel Griaule has spent weeks earning the trust of the Dogon people of the Bandiagra escarpment. What he hears over the following 2 decades, eventually published in 1965 with colleague Germaine Dieterlen as Le Renard Pale, will become one of the most contested documents in 20th century anthropology. not because it is poorly sourced, because it describes astronomical knowledge the Dogon should have no mechanism to possess. The Nommo. The Dogon describe them without ambiguity. Amphibious beings, humanoid but not human, who came from the Sirius star system. The Nommo have fish-like skin, live in and near water, and make a sound like the sea when they speak. Their arrival was accompanied by a vessel, described as spinning on a wind and making a great noise when it descended. The vessel left a mark in the earth. The Nommo emerged and taught the Dogon the foundations of their civilization: weaving, agriculture, blacksmithing, and the structure of the cosmos. Here is the astronomical problem. The Dogon possessed detailed knowledge of the Sirius system that European science had not yet confirmed. Specifically, they knew about Sirius B, the companion star to Sirius A, invisible to the naked eye, which Western astronomers had theorized since 1844, but did not photograph until 1970. The Dogon called Sirius B by the name Po Tolo and described it as the smallest, densest, and heaviest object in the sky. They said it orbited Sirius A in an ellipse with a period of 50 years. The actual orbital period of Sirius B is 50.9 years. The Dogon drew the orbital ellipse. It is accurate. This would be unremarkable if the Dogon had observatories. They do not. It would be explainable if the information appeared in their records after contact with European astronomers. But Grial's primary informant, an elder named Ogo Temeli, presented the Sirius B knowledge as foundational cosmological structure, not recent addition. It was not peripheral, it was load-bearing. Astrophysicist Robert Temple spent a decade analyzing the Grial and Dieterlen material and published his findings in 1976 as the Sirius Mystery. Temple identified multiple additional accurate details in Dogon astronomy, including knowledge of a potential third body in the Sirius system, which he labeled Sirius C. Astronomers have been actively debating the existence of Sirius C since the 1990s. If Sirius C exists and follows the parameters the Dogon outline, the description will be proven accurate, approximately 2,000 years after it was first encoded in oral tradition. The mainstream response was to suggest that Griol had contaminated the research, inadvertently transmitting his own astronomical knowledge to his informants during decades of fieldwork. This requires accepting that Griol, who was not a professional astronomer, correctly communicated specific, quantified, orbital mechanical data to his informants, who then integrated it not as new information, but as foundational structure within a cosmology. Temple spent 10 years reverse engineering. The contamination hypothesis is available. It is not simple. The Nommo are not described as historical figures. They are described as present. Specific Dogon ritual invokes them not as memory, but as active participants. The sound of the sea, produced by holding a shell to the ear, is described as the Nommo speaking. Their return is anticipated not as mythological future event, but as practical certainty. The same vessel, described the same way, making the same descent. The Dogon are specific. The Nommo are in the water. They are waiting for something. What gave the Dogon an orbital period accurate to within 0.9 years for a star invisible to the naked eye? What is the third object in the system that astronomers are still arguing about? And what is living in the water that a people with no telescope, located 4,000 miles from Mesopotamia, describes in the same sentence as the sea, civilization, and beings who came from above? The Bandiagra escarpment rises over Mali in the dry season heat. The Dogon are still there. The Nommo, according to the Dogon, are still in the water. 4,000 miles north, the same description appears carved into Egyptian temple walls under a name that means the divine ones. In Egypt, they did not merely teach, they governed. And their reign lengths are recorded in the same administrative format as every pharaoh who followed them. Number 5. The Netjeru. You're inside the Temple of Edfu, on the west bank of the Nile in 1860. Heinrich Brugsch, a German Egyptologist, is working through inscriptions on the inner walls that have been visible for decades, but not fully translated. What the texts describe has been known in fragments to Egyptian scholars for years. When Brugsch assembles the complete account and publishes it, the academic response is to classify it as religious literature, which it is. The question is what else it might be. The Netjeru. The word is ancient Egyptian, rendered in hieroglyphs, translated as the divine ones or the divine powers. It is the word rendered as gods in almost every English-language Egyptology text ever produced. But what the oldest Egyptian inscriptions actually describe as Netjeru is not abstract cosmic principle. It is beings who came to Earth at a specific moment, governed for a period, and departed. The Edfu building texts, carved on the Ptolemaic-era temple walls but explicitly claiming to record what their scribes called the most ancient documents, describe this event by name. They call it Zep Tepi, the first time. In Zep Tepi, according to the Edfu texts, a group of beings arrived on an island that rose from the primordial waters. They established the first sacred place. They brought law, language, and the measurement of the sky. Their era ended. The primordial island flooded. The beings departed. Human civilization did not originate with humans. It inherited what the Netjeru left. Here's what makes the Egyptian record harder to dismiss than theology. The Turin King List, a Ramesside-era papyrus from approximately 1200 B.C.E., records the sequence of Egyptian rulers from the earliest period. The list opens with a section that Egyptologists have translated, with varying degrees of discomfort, as the reign of gods. Specific Netjeru are named Ta, Ra, Shu, Geb, Osiris, Set, Horus, Thoth. Each is assigned a reign length. The combined god reigns before the first human pharaoh total approximately 36,000 years. The list does not distinguish god reigns from human pharaoh reigns in structure. It is a continuous administrative document. The compilers saw no categorical difference between the two types of entry. Thoth is the Netjeru who most clearly resists allegory. In the texts, he is described as coming from a place called the Island of Fire, or the Island of Flame, which appears in the pyramid texts as a location distinct from both Egypt and the afterlife. Thoth brought hieroglyphic writing, mathematics, astronomy, and law. He possessed a body of knowledge the texts call the 42 Books of Thoth. The Greek Hermetica, drawing on Egyptian tradition, describes this same material as the Emerald Tablets, the recorded knowledge of an era that preceded human civilization. Osiris is described in texts from the Old Kingdom forward as having come from elsewhere. The Pyramid Texts, the oldest religious corpus in human history, inscribed inside 5th Dynasty pyramids around 2400 B.C.E., contain passages describing the pharaoh after death ascending by star path to specific coordinates in the northern sky. The descriptions are precise enough that modern astrophysicists have identified which specific stars are being referenced. This is not poetry about reaching heaven. This is a navigational document. Someone who had traveled that route wrote the directions. The major Egyptian sacred sites do not encode the sky of their own construction period. The Giza complex, the Dendera zodiac, and the Edfu temple encode stellar positions corresponding to a period between 10,000 and 12,000 years before they were built. Someone remembered a sky from thousands of years before the stone was laid. Someone built that memory into monuments designed to last indefinitely. Who were the Netjeru? Why does the Turin King List record their reign lengths in the same administrative format as human pharaohs without structural distinction? Why do the pyramid texts describe a specific stellar navigation route rather than general religious aspiration? Who had been to the destination that the dead pharaoh was instructed to reach? And what events, encoded in the alignments of the stones along the Nile, occurred 10,000 years before the Old Kingdom that someone thought worth preserving in permanent stone? The inscriptions at Edfu say what they say. On the other side of the Indian subcontinent, another tradition describes beings who never left at all, still present in cities beneath the earth, protected by a ruling that the nation's highest court is still enforcing today. Number 6. The Nagas. You're in a carved cave temple in Rajasthan in the 6th century CE. The stone walls are covered in images of serpentine beings, humanoid above the waist, with multiple hooded cobra heads fanning from behind the crown. They wear royal garments. They carry jewels, tridents, and objects of power. Their eyes are open and direct. In the texts housed in the monastery complex above, they are not described as myth. They are described as neighbors. Living neighbors, below, the Nagas. The word appears in Sanskrit with a frequency that suggests systematic recording, not literary invention. The Mahabharata alone contains hundreds of references. The Puranas, the Ramayana, the Arthashastra. Every major literary tradition of ancient India references the Nagas, not as distant legend, but as concurrent reality. They live in Nagaloka, a subterranean realm described in specific geographic terms. Entrance points are named, beneath certain rivers, beneath certain mountains, accessible through specific caves and wells. The kingdom itself is described with architectural precision, palaces of crystal and precious stone, cities lit by the jewels embedded in the Nagas' own crowns, which generate light rather than reflect it. Their physical form follows rules. The most common description is a human torso and head, with a serpentine lower body and a multi-hooded cobra fan above the crown. But the texts are consistent, that Nagas can take fully human form and move among humans undetected. This second form is operational, not decorative. Naga dynasty claims appear across separate and geographically distant cultures, with no shared cultural inheritance. The Pallava kings of South India trace dynastic lineage to a Naga. The Chola dynasty's origin myth involves a Naga princess, and the Khmer kings of Cambodia performed a nightly ritual with a Naga in human female form in the highest tower of Angkor Wat, described as a divine obligation without which the kingdom would collapse. Here's what the texts are specific about. The Nagas hold 3 domains of knowledge above all others: metallurgy, pharmacology, and the working of stone. They are credited across regional traditions with teaching ironworking, with knowledge of specific medicinal preparations derived from plants found only in underground environments, and with a technique for cutting and moving stone that has left no surviving equivalent. The cave temples at Ajanta and Ellora are attributed in local oral tradition not to human builders, but to Naga craftsmen. Under microscopic analysis, the carved surfaces at certain Ellora chambers bear tool marks that have not been matched to any known ancient Indian tool set. The most disturbing element of the Naga tradition is not their existence, but their continuity. The texts do not describe the Nagas as historical beings who came and left. They describe beings who are currently present beneath specific rivers and specific mountains in Nagaloka, which exists in present tense in every text that references it. Certain temples in South India maintain restricted access chambers described as entrances to Nagaloka. The priests who guard them describe the restriction not as reverence but as agreement. The Nagas permit the temple's existence on the surface. In exchange, no one opens the door. In 2011 and 2012, archaeologists cataloged the sealed vaults beneath the Padmanabha Swami temple in Kerala. 4 vaults were opened and documented, revealing gold artifacts, jewels, and objects valued at more than $20 billion. A 5th vault, Vault B, was sealed and remained sealed following intervention by the Supreme Court of India. The argument accepted by the court: opening Vault B would disturb Naga powers and cause harm. The Supreme Court of India accepted this argument. Vault B remains sealed. This is not a decision from the ancient world. This is a contemporary legal ruling, still in force. What is in Vault B? Why do metallurgical traditions from India, Southeast Asia, China, and Mesoamerica all describe the foundational teaching of metalwork as coming from beings associated with serpents and underground realms? Why do the Nagas appear simultaneously in Vedic India, in pre-Angkor Cambodia, and across Aztec and Maya cosmology, described identically as teachers of stone and keepers of hidden knowledge? And why does a court of law in the 21st century hold that a Hindu temple vault should not be opened because of what the Nagas might do? The vault is closed. The Nagas, as far as the courts of India are concerned, are still home. On the other side of the Pacific, another being had arrived from the sky, taught an entire civilization its calendar and its stone, and left with a specific promise. An empire built a calendar to track the date of his return. When the date arrived, so did a stranger from the east. The emperor believed the calendar. He was right about the year. Number 7. Kukulkan. You're at Chichen Itza in the Yucatan in 1924. Explorer Sylvanus Morley is documenting an effect on the north face of El Castillo, the pyramid at the site's center. Twice a year, at the spring and autumn equinoxes, the descending afternoon sun casts a triangular shadow pattern along the stepped balustrade of the northern staircase. At the base of the staircase, a carved stone serpent head sits at ground level. As the light drops, The shadow triangles align with the undulating carving of a serpent body running the full length of the balustrade. For a few minutes at solar midpoint, the complete body of a feathered serpent appears to descend the pyramid from sky to earth. This required calculated astronomical engineering. Whoever designed this stone knew exactly when the sun would do that, and built it into the architecture, Kukulkan. The Maya word translates as feathered serpent. The being it names predates the Maya, appearing in forms that suggest convergence from multiple Mesoamerican streams. To the Aztec and Toltec, Quetzalcoatl. To the Mixtec, Nine Wind. Different peoples, different centuries, the same description. Tall, bearded, with a complexion, the pre-Columbian record specifically notes as different from the surrounding population. Arrived from the sea or from the sky. Brought specific knowledge. Departed east with a specific promise. Here's what the knowledge he delivered can be measured against. The Dresden Codex, one of 4 surviving pre-Columbian Maya books, contains the most sophisticated astronomical calculations produced in the ancient Americas. Its Venus table tracks the 584-day synodic cycle of Venus with accuracy to within 14 seconds per year compared to modern astronomical measurements. Its tables of eclipse prediction cover a 10,000-year span. The mathematical system used employs a positional zero, a concept that Europe did not formally adopt until the 12th century CE. The Maya who produced the Dresden Codex stated they had not invented this knowledge. Kukulkan had given it to them. The calendrical consequence is the most historically consequential thing in this section. When Hernando Cortés arrived on the coast of Mexico in 1519, the Aztec Emperor Moctezuma II did not act impulsively. He consulted his advisors. He performed the calendrical verification. The most sophisticated calendar system in the pre-Columbian world identified 1519 as a one-reed year, the calendrical designation associated with Quetzalcoatl's predicted return. Moctezuma extended hospitality rather than military response. He was taking the calendar seriously. The calendar had named the year. Cortés arrived in that year. The odds of a random arrival falling in a one-reed year are approximately 1 in 52. Cortés also arrived from the east, from across the sea, with unprecedented technology, and with a physical appearance matching the traditional description. That is not one coincidence. It is 4 independent variables aligning with a specific ancient prediction. The error of identification cost 15 million people. The calendar had not been wrong about the year. The departure narrative recorded in pre-Aztec oral sources describes Kukulkan, Quetzalcoatl departing east across the ocean on a raft of serpents, promising to return. The same structure appears in Oannes, who came from the sea and returned to it. Thenga in the Apkallu, who came from the primordial deep and eventually stopped coming. In Viracocha in the Andes, who walked into the Pacific and disappeared. The physical description across these traditions, bearded, light-complexioned, arrived from water, taught astronomy and civilization, departed by water, made a promise, is specific enough that it cannot be explained as mythological archetype. Archetypes are not bearded. Archetypes do not have specific departure directions. What was Kukulkan? What does a feathered being arriving from the sea with a complete astronomical calendar look like to a first-century population with no framework for classifying what it is seeing? Where did he go when he traveled east across the Pacific? Why do Mesoamerica, the Andes, and the Near East all produce the same physical description of a teaching figure who arrives from water and departs into it? And why did the most precise calendar in pre-Columbian history correctly predict a year that an emperor staked an empire on? The pyramid still casts the shadow. Twice a year the feathered serpent descends. No one alive built this. And 10,000 miles away, in the oldest continuously inhabited rock art tradition on Earth, another culture had been painting beings from the sky since before Egypt existed. Those beings had no mouths. Number 8. The Wanjina. You're in the Kimberley region of northwest Western Australia, approaching a rock face that has been sacred to the Warora, Ngurinyan, and Wunambul peoples since before any date that archaeology can currently assign to the images. The paintings cover the stone in dense layering. The figures are large, some extending 5 feet from head to foot. They have enormous elongated oval heads with no mouths. Their eyes are massive, black, and and forward-facing, proportionally larger than any natural creatures. Around each head is a radiating band that researchers have described variously as a cloud formation, a headdress, or something that has no name in any language developed before the 20th century, the Wanjina. In the languages of the Kimberley peoples, the name translates as the ones who created everything. Not created in the sense of mystical divine origin, but actively, beings who arrived and made. The Warora oral traditions describe the Wanjina as having come from the sky and from the sea during a period they call the dreaming, which does not mean dreams, but the foundational era before the current world took its form. The Wanjina made the landscape. They gave the people their law, their ceremony, their language structure. When the Wanjina had finished, they entered the rock. Their images are not depictions of them. They are the Wanjina, present in a different form. Here's what makes the Wanjina images impossible to categorize as symbolic art. They do not look like anything else in 60,000 years of human artistic production. Rock art from Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Americas produces human figures, animal representations, geometric patterns, and symbolic cosmological imagery. The Wanjina belong to none of these categories. They are anatomically consistent. The proportions, the eye structure, the elongated head, the absent mouth, the radiating halo, reproduced with near-identical consistency across hundreds of separate images spread across thousands of square miles. Different artists, different centuries, possibly different millennia, all producing the same specific figure with the same specific features. In archaeology, consistency of depiction across that span is not artistic tradition, it is description. The no-mouth detail is not incidental. The Warora tradition is explicit. The Wanjina do not speak. They communicate directly into the mind. When a Wanjina wishes to convey something, the knowledge arrives without passing through sound. They can cause rain by willing it, because language is unnecessary for them to act on the physical world. Whether this is mythology or description, it names something that no human tradition invents independently, a being for whom spoken language is redundant. The images must be maintained. This is not optional. Specific elder custodians hold lineage-specific authority to repaint certain figures. If the images are allowed to fade, the rains stop. The fish do not come. The land dries. The ceremony of repainting is not preservation of art. It is maintenance of an ongoing relationship with beings who respond to whether their image is intact. This belief has been held, practiced, and transmitted continuously for longer than any other cosmological tradition known to archaeology. Australian rock art has been dated through uranium series analysis and optically stimulated luminescence to periods exceeding 50,000 years. Some Kimberley images may fall within this range. What can be said is that the beings depicted and described are presented as having arrived from outside the Earth, leaving images of themselves as continued presence. This tradition has maintained that position, without revision, for a period that precedes every civilization in this video. Look at the face on the rock. Large, forward-facing eyes, elongated skull, radiating band, no mouth. This image appeared in the Kimberley before the Indus Valley Civilization existed, before the first Sumerian cuneiform was pressed into clay. It appeared in a desert in the southern hemisphere with no connection to any Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, or Asian tradition. It looks exactly like what every culture since 1947 has associated with beings from somewhere else. The Kimberley people did not derive this image from science fiction. The resemblance goes the other way. Who came to the Kimberley? What did they look like? Why does the most ancient continuous artistic tradition on Earth depict beings that communicate without language, by direct transmission into the mind? And why does a figure with an elongated head, enormous dark eyes, and a radiating halo appear on an Australian rock face tens of thousands of years before anyone in the northern hemisphere wrote down the first description of the Anunnaki? The rock keeps the image. It has kept it longer than recorded history exists. In the Andes, a bearded stranger walked out of a flooded world and built cities. Then he walked into the ocean, same as the rest. Number 9. Viracocha. You're at the Gate of the Sun in Tiwanaku, Bolivia, at 12,500 feet, where the air is thin and the light is hard and unfiltered. The gateway is carved from a single block of andesite weighing approximately 10 tons. At its center is a relief figure standing in profile, crowned with radiating serpents, holding a staff in each hand, flanked by 48 winged attendant figures in 3 descending rows. This being has a name recorded across Andean oral tradition, stretching from Bolivia to Ecuador, from the Pacific coast to the edge of the Amazon basin. Multiple Spanish chroniclers recorded the same accounts independently in the 16th century. The accounts match. Viracocha. The name has been translated as Foam of the Sea, Lord of the Waters, or the Absolute One from Beyond. The physical description in Andean tradition is specific and consistent. Tall, bearded, with a skin tone that the pre-Columbian record specifically notes as different from the surrounding population. He arrived after a great deluge, the previous world destroyed by water. He emerged from Lake Titicaca, or in some regional accounts from the sea, and walked north along the coast and through the high plateau, naming things as he passed and teaching everything he touched. What he taught is specific. At Tiwanaku, which the oral tradition holds he built or commissioned, he demonstrated stonework techniques. He taught agricultural methods adapted to high-altitude growing conditions. He taught the astronomical calendar encoded in the gate of the sun's frieze. He organized governance structures. Then, at a point variously described as the Pacific coast of Ecuador, he walked into the ocean and did not return. He promised to come back. He was specific about this. The Spanish chroniclers who recorded these accounts are the critical evidentiary link. Pedro Chiesa de Leon, working in the 1540s along the Peruvian coast, and Juan de Betanzos, working in the 1550s in Cusco from different informants in a different region, produced descriptions of Viracocha that are verbatim consistent with each other, not similar, verbatim, the same specific details, the physical description, the northward walk, the naming of places, the departure into the sea, the promise of return. These men did not collaborate. They were in different locations with different sources. The underlying account was stable enough across the Andean world that 2 separate chroniclers, working independently, extracted the same precise narrative. The Spanish attempted to interpret Viracocha as a precursor image of Jesus Christ. The parallels are apparent: arrival, teaching, departure, promised return. But Viracocha's accounts predate Christianity by an undetermined and substantial period. The Gate of the Sun predates the Inca Empire. The foundational tradition was not assembled after the ships arrived. Archaeoastronomer Arthur Poznansky spent decades analyzing the stellar calendar encoded in the Gate of the Sun's frieze, publishing findings in the 1940s. His analysis suggested that the depicted stellar positions correspond not to Tiwanaku's building period, but to approximately 15,000 BCE. If the calendar is accurate, what it preserves is a sky that existed 13,000 years before the civilization that raised the stone. Someone remembered that sky. Someone built it into a monument designed to outlast everything built around it. The figure described across the Andes, bearded and light-complexioned, arriving from water, teaching stonework and astronomy, departing into water with a promise, is structurally identical to Oannes, who came from the sea, delivered the full curriculum of civilization, and returned each night to the Abzu. Identical to Kukulkan, who arrived from across the water, gave the calendar, and departed east with a promise. Identical to the Apkallu, each with an assigned knowledge domain, each ascending from the primordial deep. These accounts span 4 continents. They share no known cultural connection, no common language group, no documented trade or migration pathway. And they describe the same figure, performing the same function, making the same departure. That is not mythology. That is not archetype. Archetypes are not bearded. Archetypes do not walk in specific directions and step into specific oceans. Archetypes do not make calendrically precise promises. What was Viracocha? Why do 4 separate civilizations across the full breadth of the inhabited world describe the same bearded figure, arriving from water, teaching civilization, and walking back into the sea? Why do 2 Spanish chroniclers, working from independent sources in different regions, extract verbatim consistent accounts? And what is encoded in the Gate of the Sun that corresponds to a sky from 15,000 BCE? The gate stands in the Bolivian plateau. The figure carved into it looks east, toward nothing in the current world. 10,000 miles northeast, a text that was almost permanently removed from history described beings who came down from the heavens for the same purpose. In that account, They were not permitted to leave. Number 10. The Watchers. You're in the Judean desert in 1947. A Bedouin shepherd named Muhammad ad-Dib has just thrown a stone into a cave above Qumran and heard it hit pottery. What he has found will take decades to fully excavate and catalog. Among the documents recovered from 11 caves are multiple complete or near-complete copies of a text that the early Christian church decided should not be included in the Bible. Multiple copies. Carefully preserved, clearly valued. The Book of Enoch. Inside it, an account that the compilers of the biblical canon found too specific to keep and too widely read to fully erase. The Watchers. The Hebrew word is Grigori. The Book of Enoch names them, numbers them, and describes exactly what happened. 200 beings descended from the heavens onto Mount Hermon, a specific mountain range on what is now the Syria-Lebanon border, at a specific elevation identified as the summit. They descended before the flood. Their leader was named Semyaza. They had a hierarchy. 18 sub-leaders are named, each with a specific domain of authority assigned. The Watchers took human wives. They produced children. The children were giants, the Nephilim, and they grew to a scale the texts describe with metabolic specificity. They consumed everything humans had, and then they consumed the humans. The food supply collapsed. Violence spread. The earth became uninhabitable. The Book of Enoch is explicit about the causal chain. The Watchers descend, the Nephilim consume the world, and the flood follows as a necessary response to a biological catastrophe the descent produced. This is not mythological language for human wickedness. This is a sequential account of specific consequences following specific events. Here's what the Book of Enoch adds that every other ancient tradition stops short of. The Watchers taught things. This is the element that generates the divine tribunal the text describes in detail. Azazel taught humans how to make weapons of iron and bronze. He taught women the art of cosmetics and the knowledge of dyeing cloth. Other Watchers taught the cutting of roots and their pharmaceutical applications, both medicinal and toxic, enchantments and their dissolution, astronomy and astrology, the reading of clouds, the reading of the earth, the signs of the sun, the course of the moon, the courses of the stars, the complete curriculum of early technological civilization, delivered by name, by teacher, in sequence. The reason they were condemned is the detail that no other ancient tradition states this clearly. The knowledge was not evil, it was premature. The Watchers gave humans capability before humans had developed the ethical or structural foundation to use it safely. The result was catastrophe. This framing, knowledge delivered too early, civilization arriving faster than wisdom, does not appear anywhere else in ancient literature in this form. Every other tradition that credits non-human beings with teaching civilization presents the teaching as a gift. The Book of Enoch presents it as a crime, not because the knowledge was dark, but because the timing was wrong. The punishment. God commands the archangels to bind the Watchers beneath the mountains of the earth, in darkness, in specific locations, until the day of judgment. The text does not say they were destroyed. It does not say they were exiled. They were imprisoned. They are still there, beneath mountains, in darkness, conscious, waiting for a specific event. The Book of Enoch was not written as metaphor. It was written as a record of events whose consequences are ongoing. The Book of Enoch was widely read in ancient Israel. Multiple copies at Qumran, referenced in the New Testament letters of Peter and Jude, quoted by early Christian writers. The Council of Laodicea, approximately 363 CE, declared it non-canonical. The reasons are not recorded in the Council's surviving documents. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church never accepted this. The Book of Enoch remained in the Ethiopian canon, preserved in the Ge'ez language. This is why complete copies exist at all. A document widely circulated, widely copied, and then officially removed without a stated reason. 10 traditions. Sumer, Mesopotamia, Babylon, Mali, Egypt, India, the Maya, Australia, the Andes, and the ancient Levant. No shared language, no documented trade route, no migration pathway that connects them across the distances involved. And the same account. Beings came from the sky or from the sea. They taught the foundations of civilization. They were not human, and they left, or returned to the water, or entered the rock, or were put beneath the mountains. Every culture that recorded them said the same thing in different words. Something that was not human gave us what we call civilization. Not one of those 10 traditions ever claimed it was their own idea. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Like if you think the official timeline has a chapter that hasn't been told. And drop a comment from wherever in the world you're watching, because from Sumer to the Kimberley to Qumran, every one of us is living downstream of the same unanswered question.